بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى، والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى. معالي وزير التجارة،
dear audience and guests and all who joined us today from all over the world. Corona came, that pandemic came and has made unprecedented change in the world, and without exaggeration, it has turned over upside down in health, on social level and economical level. The corona hurricane was strong, and then the countries have sustained and been able to face all the pandemics with intellect and money and wisdom. And one of those countries
السعودية التي ترحب بكم اليوم من كل أنحاء العالم في هذا المنتدى الدولي للقياس الذي تنظمه واحدة من الجهات التي أثبتت خلال الجائحة أنها بقدر المسؤولية وأكثر. أتحدث عن الهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة. فأهلا بكم في هذا الوطن الذي يفتح ذراعي المحبة والسلام لكل العالم. هنا وطن تصافحه المعالي ويمدد للسلام يدا وروحا. السيدات والسادة، في زمن كورونا نمر كل يوم على الملايين من أجهزة القياس في العالم والتي تعطي أمانا صحيا أكثر، لكننا من غير المختصين ربما لا نعلم أن خلف نجاح هذه الأجهزة علما كاملا قائما بخبرائه ومؤسساته ومهتميه اسمه القياس. ونحن هنا اليوم لنضيء حوله ما يستحق من الضوء والعلم والمعرفة. وبعد، بما أننا نستضيف العالم أجمع اليوم، سأجدني مقصرا إذا لم أقل شكرا لكل الدول التي قادت شعوبها إلى بر الأمان في هذه الجائحة، وسأكون مقصرا أكثر إذا لم أدعو لبدء أولى كلمات هذا المؤتمر أو المنتدى الرجل الذي ينطوي تحت إدارته المركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة الذي قدم نجاحا كبيرا وتاريخيا في هذه الجائحة. حيوا ورحبوا معي بمعالي محافظ الهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة الدكتور سعد بن عثمان القصبي.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي وزير التجارة دكتور ماجد بن عبد الله القصبي، السادة رؤساء منظمات التقييس الدولية، السيدات والسادة، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إنه لمن دواعي الفخر والاعتزاز أن تحتضن بلادي المملكة العربية السعودية المنتدى الدولي للقياس استمرارا لجهودها المتواصلة في تقديم رؤى محفزة للتكامل والتعاون مع المجتمع عزيز سبل التعاون بين دول العالم في كافة المجالات للمضي قدما في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة وتعزيز دور أنشطة التقييس للارتقاء بجودة الخدمات والمنتجات وتحسين مستويات التجارة البينية بين مختلف دول العالم. الضيوف الأعزاء، نحتفي هذا اليوم باليوم العالمي للمترولوجيا للعام 2021 تحت شعار القياس من أجل الصحة، في الوقت الذي تلقي فيه التأثيرات السلبية لجائحة كورونا بظلالها على كافة مناحي الحياة صحياً واقتصادياً واجتماعياً. وبالطبع فقد امتد التأثير للحراك العلمي الدولي، حيث يلعب علم القياس دوراً رئيساً في تمكين القطاع الصحي لتقديم خدماته بفاعلية ودعم الأبحاث والقياسات الصحية الموجهة للحد من تأثير وانتشار فيروس كورونا. وتأكيداً على أهمية علم القياس كأحد العلوم الداعمة للمجال الصحي، يقدم المكتب الدولي للأوزان BIPM على سبيل المثال خدمات المقارنة والمعايرة في مجال الإشعاع لمعاهد القياس الوطنية في العالم، إضافة إلى منظمة الصحة العالمية والوكالة الدولية للطاقة الذرية. وتساعد هذه الخدمات في دعم الدقة في التشخيص والفاعلية في العلاج لحوالي 7 ملايين من المرضى الذين يخضعون للعلاج بالأشعة سنوياً، وكذلك إلى 33 مليون حالة يتم تشخيصها بواسطة الطب النووي، وأكثر من 360 مليون حالة يتم تشخيصها بواسطة الأشعة السينية. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك يتم مراقبة نحو 11 مليون شخص يعملون مع الإشعاعات لوقايتهم من الجرعات الزائدة من الإشعاع. السيدات والسادة، نعمل في الهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة والمركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة على تعزيز ودعم الجهود الوطنية والدولية للحد من انتشار جائحة كورونا، إذ يمثل المركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة في المملكة العربية السعودية واحداً من أكثر المراكز الوطنية تطوراً في المنطقة، ويضم أكثر من 30 مختبراً نوعياً متخصصاً، وتعمل فيه كفاءات وسواعد مؤهلة علمياً وعملياً. ونتواصل باستمرار مع المراكز الوطنية المنتشرة في العالم لتبادل الخبرات ومشاركة النشاطات العلمية، إيماناً منا بأهمية الشراكة والتكامل مع المنظومة الدولية للقياس والمعايرة، وبما يحقق الخير والنماء لدول العالم وصحة وسلامة البشرية. الحضور الكرام، ختاماً أتقدم بخالص الشكر والتقدير لمعالي وزير التجارة في المملكة العربية السعودية على رعايته الكريمة ودعمه لهذا المنتدى، والشكر أيضاً موصول للخبراء والمتحدثين المشاركين معنا في هذه الفعالية المهمة، ولكم حضورنا الكريم على حرصكم وتفاعلكم، متطلعاً لأن يحقق هذا المنتدى أهدافه المرجوة. والله نسأل التوفيق والسداد، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السيدات والسادة المنضمون إلينا من كل أنحاء العالم، من الأوجه الحسنة لهذه الجائحة أنها أيقظت الدور الأكبر للتقنية، وهو ما جعلنا بكل بساطة نلتقي اليوم كل في مكانه من أنحاء العالم كافة. ماذا تعرفون عن القياس في المملكة العربية السعودية؟ الفيلم التالي المعنون بالقياس والمعايرة، إسهامات وطنية متميزة، يجيبكم.
Here, our story began. We transcended time and space to provide quality of life and economic competition. We developed our capabilities and expanded our services. We established a system that employs quality in our standards. Because of the importance of measurement and calibration, and because it's one of the most important activities of Saudi Standards, Metrology and Quality Organization, and for the sake of the Kingdom leadership and its interest in calibration and measurement since ancient time, the National Measurement and Calibration Center, NMCC, was established in 1986 to be the national authority concerned with establishing, preserving, and developing measurement standards. For one standard, one measurement, and one acceptable report by National Measurement Standards, in 2011, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia signed the document to join the Meter Agreement and to facilitate the establishment of cooperation relations between the legal standards authorities in the member states. The Kingdom has also joined the International Organization for Legal Metrology and its participating committees. Nowadays, the National Metrology Institute of Saudi Arabia has 30 specialized national laboratories. It contributes to the services of scientific, legal, and industrial metrology to support all relevant sectors. The center is equipped with primary and secondary measuring standards and advanced measuring equipment and systems managed by national technical competencies with the highest level of expertise in the various fields of measurement and calibration. They were trained, qualified in highest level to attribute measurement outcomes to the International System of Units, SI. The center played a vital role in the National Transformation Program by spearheading an initiative that offered legal calibration services for the verification tools used, as well as attribution to national and international references for those tools. The center has essential contributions to the protection and safety, and this is our title today.
كل مسؤول في هذه الجائحة أخذ على عاتقه هم النجاح وقاد فريقه وفق رؤى محكمة لا تقبل الخطأ أو الارتجال أو الهفوات حتى، واستطاع أن يسجل للتاريخ نجاحا سيبقى مدونا باسم وطنه. ومن هؤلاء معالي وزير التجارة ورئيس مجلس إدارة الهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة الدكتور ماجد بن عبد الله القصبي الذي يتحدث إليكم الآن.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدات والسادة رؤساء المنظمات الدولية، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أتشرف اليوم أن أشارككم افتتاح المنتدى الدولي للقياس، والذي تنظمه المملكة العربية السعودية ضمن مشاركتها دول العالم في الاحتفال باليوم العالمي للمترولوجيا لهذا العام 2021. آملين أن تشكل هذه الفعالية خطوة فعالة وعملية لرسم مستقبل أفضل لقطاع المترولوجيا، وداعما للاستقرار الصحي والنمو الاقتصادي والاجتماعي في مختلف دول العالم. يعد علم القياس واحدا من العلوم المحورية التي تساعد على تعزيز الاقتصاديات الوطنية والعالمية، بما يمثله هذا العلم من مرجعية للتعاملات والتبادل التجاري سواء على المستويات الوطنية أو الإقليمية أو الدولية. وقد أولت حكومة بلادي المملكة العربية السعودية بهذا المجال، وذلك من خلال إصدار أول مرسوم ملكي لنظام المعايرة والمقاييس بالعام 1963 ميلادي، أي ما يقارب منذ 60 عام تقريبا. وتبرز أهمية علم القياس في هذا الوقت الحرج الذي يمر به العالم على الصعيد الصحي، للتأكيد على أهمية هذا العلم في تعزيز القدرات الوطنية والدولية في كافة المجالات الاقتصادية والعلمية. ولا يخفى على الجميع الوضع الصحي الذي فرضته جائحة كورونا كوفيد-19 على العالم، والذي استدعى من الجميع العمل الجاد لتسخير كافة الإمكانات العلمية لمواجهة هذا الوباء بشكل فاعل ومتكامل. وتبذل المملكة العربية السعودية جهوداً كبيرة للارتقاء بكافة عناصر منظومة البنية التحتية للجودة، وبشكل خاص مجال القياس والمعايرة، إدراكاً منها بأهمية القياس في تعزيز ودعم النماء الاقتصادي والصناعي. في الختام، الشكر من القلب، والشكر من القلب لجميع من ساهم وشارك وبادر وعمل في مواجهة جائحة كورونا، وخالص الشكر والتقدير للهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة على تنظيم هذا المنتدى، والشكر للمتحدثين والخبراء وكافة المشاركين، متمنيا للجميع التوفيق والسداد. وشكرا لكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إلى هنا يقف دور المنبر ليبدأ دور الجلسة المعنونة بالقياس من أجل الصحة التي ستقدمها وتقدم ضيوفها وتديرها الزميلة الإعلامية وأستاذة الإعلام الاقتصادي بلا مبالغة الأستاذة نادين هاني. تذكروا أن كورونا وإن كانت وما زالت غمامة سوداء تضلل العالم إلا أنها بالعمل والالتزام والتعاون ستنجلي وتشرق شمس الحياة الطبيعية مجددا. يقول علي بن أبي طالب: سنحيا بعد كربتنا ربيعا كأن لم نذق بالأمس مرة. الكلمة إليك أستاذة نادين، ومعها أدعو الدكتور محمد العبد العالي والمهندس علي الضلعان للصعود إلى منصة المنتدى.
شكرا أستاذ الشقيقي على المقدمة الكريمة، وإن شاء الله عن قريب نخلص من هذه الجائحة ونستعيد حياتنا الطبيعية وأكون متواجدة معكم بالسعودية على المنبر. صباح الخير جميعا، أهلا وسهلا بكم إلى هذه الجلسة الحوارية بعنوان القياس من أجل الصحة. قبل أن نبدأ النقاش أود الإشارة إلى أن هذه الجلسة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، سبب أنه عندنا عدد من المتحدثين لا يتكلمون اللغة العربية، بالتالي أسهل، ولكن الترجمة الفورية موجودة لمن يرغب بأن يستمع إلى هذا الحوار باللغة العربية، فإذا اسمحوا لي أن أتحول إلى الإنجليزية. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session, which will discuss the theme for this year's World Metrology Day, Metrology for Health. As has been mentioned this morning, the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world by storm in the first quarter of last year. It disrupted all aspects of our lives. However, the speed with which the scientific community had to react to deal with the health crisis of that scale, and with which it was able to ultimately develop vaccines, that speed was unprecedented, really. Embedded all along the virus response, from the testing stage to the development of personal protection gear and treatments to the development of the vaccines, was the need for measurement. 2020 was really a landmark year for science and was only made possible because of the established science and metrology capabilities around the world. So how did the metrology community lend its expertise in measurement science to the fight against COVID? What measurement requirements have been identified, and ultimately, how important is measurement in supporting the protection of health? We will try to address those questions over the next hour with our esteemed panelists. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammed Al-Abd Al-Ali, the spokesperson of the Saudi Ministry of Health, Dr. Martin Milton, the director of the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, BIPM, Mr. Anthony Donnellan, the director of the International Bureau of Legal Metrology, BIML, and Engineer Ali Dal'an, VP for Medical Devices Sector at the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, SFDA. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Before we start our discussion, I would like to note that all participants who are listening in today can engage with us by sending us their questions to the email address that was provided to them in the email confirmation of the registration. As a reminder, that email address is a.mohammed@eventat.fa. I will try to allocate some time a little bit later on in the discussion to the audience questions. So let us start with Dr. Mohammed Al-Abd Al-Ali. Saudi Arabia was among the countries that did an amazing job really in fighting the pandemic, specifically the efforts of the Ministry of Health and all the organizations that are in the scientific field. Can you explain to us how that was achieved?
Thanks, Nadine, and would like to start thanking the organizing committee and the authority for organizing this international forum, and for all those who are joining us around the world and here in the kingdom. Regarding your question, Nadine, thank you very much. And it's the experience of Saudi Arabia in encountering pandemics is not something new. Decades we are managing mass gatherings, multiple mass gatherings events, particularly Hajj, and successfully managing the Hajj season, and we have had multiple experiences and successful experiences in encountering and managing deadlier viruses. Among these viruses, MERS, the Middle East coronavirus. And with all that cumulative knowledge and the availability of experts and talented, skillful scientists and physicians and healthcare professionals and practitioners in the kingdom, we were capable over the last decades, and currently also we are capable of managing such kind of pandemic. The success that happened in the kingdom is related to multiple aspects. The experience is one, but beside that experience, the kingdom started seriously as early as possible in managing this pandemic, not by putting the healthcare sector in front of the pandemic, but making new governance support, putting multiple sectors together supporting each other. 25 different sectors not related to health but collaborating and complementing with health started at high level in a national committee to meet on daily basis, sometimes multiple times per day, reporting to the highest authority in the kingdom, monitored at high level, supported each other to encounter and fight and react to this pandemic at very early stages. We looked at serious action, serious interventions, speedy interventions, very active and strong interventions at the early stages of this pandemic that led to appropriate prevention. The number of recommendations, I will let you recall 1 year back the amount of interventions happened, not at the point of entries and controlling the point of entries and slowing down and preventing the virus as much as possible from entering as early to the kingdom was one very important thing to give us time to appropriately make our preparedness. Second to that is the amount of investment happened to support health in detection, early identification of cases, appropriate screening, availability of mass testing, the availability of primary and preventive measures, investing in digitals to support all these things. We can see that there are multiple digital solutions and electronic solutions that entered into the healthcare to support self-assessment, unified platforms to register and monitor testing and to report cases and monitor cases and do all these kind of support, plus the telemedicine and remote services that can be provided. All these things supported also by an appropriate secondary and tertiary care that were also supported and increased dramatically. And more than 50% of our intensive care capacity increased in few months at early stages of the pandemic. And this is a one very important example of how the reaction is happening in the kingdom. With that amount of thousands of intensive care beds added, definitely there are multiple equipments, multiple talented and skillful and qualified and specialized healthcare professionals were added to the service. It's very important to mention that the competition against all these resources, the limitations in movement around the world were strong challenges in front of us, yet we were capable of doing all that with the unlimited support that the healthcare sector given by the authority and the government of Saudi Arabia. Beside these things, the management of controlling the behaviors of the community, awareness, education, plus to that, it's very important to let the community go back to its life, but with precautions, with awareness, with the limitations of risky activities. So that back to new norms was a very important thing and happened successfully. Mass gathering events, maybe we can control and prevent, but Hajj season is a very important thing, and we are proud in this kingdom for being servant for Hajj and Hajjis, and for our king to be the custodian of the two holy mosques, and the Hajj performed appropriately. After all these things, we received multiple compliments and thanks and appreciations from WHO at multiple stages, early stages controlling Umrah, later stages controlling Hajj, and one very important appreciation for being a true example of health for all, after the royal order that all citizens and residents, including those who are illegally here living in the kingdom, will be provided the needed health care regardless of their legal situation. With that also, The Lancet, a very important journal, published in its editorial a very important article about the challenges that yet to come in facing COVID-19, and they excluded the GCC countries, and namely they mentioned Saudi Arabia for being an outlier, a positive outlier in controlling the pandemic and in a stable situation. That's because of the digital investment, availability of fever clinics, investment in critical care, unlimited support to all these services. And plus to that, look at any ranking, whether it's to speed in testings, whether it's in mortality rates, pandemic control, preparedness, security, safety to travel to the country. You will see us one of the best 5 countries, if not then in the 10, if not then in the 20 best countries around the world in the reaction to this pandemic. Thanks, Nadine.
This, of course, couldn't have been achieved without harmonization and cooperation with international organizations. Let us ask Dr. Milton about metrology in this pandemic, but also in a broader scope. Can you explain to us, Doctor, the importance of sound measurement systems in general in achieving healthcare policy, and specifically its importance over the past year in the fight against COVID?
Thank you very much, Madam Hani, and thank you all for organizing this event today. Thank you, Your Excellency Abdullah Al-Kasabi, for opening the meeting today, and Mr. Al-Abdullahi from the Ministry of Health. Thank you for your contribution to this. So this seminar held today marks World Metrology Day, as we heard in the introduction. And World Metrology Day is the day that marks the signature in 1875 of the Meter Convention by 17 states at that time. Now, in the Meter Convention, we have 63 member states and 39 associate states. So it's truly a global organization that has grown from the conception of 17 states in Paris signing that convention in 1875. It's been our privilege, of course, to welcome the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 2011 when you acceded to the Meter Convention, and we are very grateful for your contribution, particularly through your National Institute, SASO, your contribution to the global measurement system, and in particular to your support for the regional organization, GulfMet, which supports measurement and metrology in the Gulf region. So my thanks to you for that. I visited in 2016 and it was fascinating and inspiring for me to see what you've done. So our theme is health, and of course the context is the global pandemic that seems to dominate everything. I'd like to introduce a little bit about why we all depend on measurement to address healthcare issues. And I'd like to talk about 3 particular aspects of what we do in measurement that contribute to supporting society in addressing its healthcare needs. The first one is in the area of laboratory medicine. So when we go to the family doctor, when we go to the hospital to have a test of our blood, to have a test of samples, medical samples, the results of those tests being accurate. We rely on the results of those tests being equivalent from one hospital to another hospital. So all of that is achieved because there is a global measurement system that supports laboratory medicine. We call the field laboratory medicine. We work very closely with the International Federation of Clinical Chemistry, who are the international body bringing together laboratory medicine around the world. And we've worked specifically with them on putting in place a system that ensures traceable measurements of the most important measurements made to support health. So these include cholesterol and glucose in blood. They include measurements of enzymes. They include measurements of nucleic acid. So that's the field of laboratory medicine. But that's not all that metrology does to support health. Of course, we also support the very important measurements of X-rays and of beams needed for radiotherapy. When we're exposed to X-rays, because we're being tested for some medical reason, we want to be sure that the extent of the exposure to the X-rays is safe. How can we be sure it's safe? It's because we have a global system that ensures that measurements of X-rays are at a safe level. Those safe levels of X-rays, they're all traced back through a series of calibrations carried out around the world, back to our laboratories in Paris, where we hold the primary standard that ensures safe measurements of X-rays. The same is the case when we're exposed to radiotherapy, if we have to receive a treatment for some reason. We want to be sure that the treatment we receive is the level that was agreed and proposed by the doctors, the level that's going to be safe and help support our health. And the final area to think about how measurement supports health is in the field of measurements of the patient, measurements of the temperature of the patient. I'm not going to say so much about that now because I think you've got a very interesting talk after the break from Mr. Machin from the UK, who I think will inform you about a lot of interesting work that's done to ensure that when we measure the temperature of patients, that those are done correctly. Thank you.
Doctor, I would like to go back to you a little bit later and discuss how that existing infrastructure, let's say, helps the fight against COVID. But let us now go to Mr. Donnellan. Mr. Donnellan, I'd like you to explain the role of the International Bureau of Legal Metrology during the pandemic and also its cooperation with regional and international standardization bodies.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Honey, and I would also like to express my gratitude to all of the conference organizers in putting together what is an excellent program for World Metrology Day as we celebrate together. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the role of Dr. Majid Al-Kasabi, the Honourable Minister, and also Dr. Abdullali for his very insightful introduction in terms of a number of the initiatives that the Kingdom is undertaking to fight COVID, but also its broader quality infrastructure. So, Madam Honey, in terms of answering the question that you posed, obviously the period has presented not only individuals, businesses, governments, challenges and disturbances, as you mentioned at the beginning, but it's also offered opportunities, and the international organizations and international community is part of that. And I think, in my view, in many ways, the pandemic has accelerated some of the existing plans and some of the existing objectives for many international organizations. And this includes our organization, the OIML. Many international organizations, I think, have accelerated, increased their level of online engagement. But this isn't just limited to online meetings, but includes the way we interact, consultations, and also embracing new principles that help fight COVID and other pandemics, including open data principles and engaging on a number of different information channels. And this has had a profound effect, I think, in a lot of ways. It has empowered a number of voices, and these voices perhaps have not always been heard through traditional forms of communication. I think also the pandemic has encouraged international organizations to prioritize and focus on what is truly important and what is valued to us as humans, in our societies, and also to the planet. There's been, I think, a recalibration in some sense of what is truly important, and measurement for health, as outlined by my colleagues, is one of those areas. The third aspect I'd like to mention in terms of answering your question, Madam Honey, is related to my first point. And I think the pandemic has increased the accessibility of international organizations, including the OIML, and many others. And what do I mean by this? I think there's been a greater focus on opening up and participation, public information sessions, webinars, similar to what we're doing now, and information exchanges. And this has also impacted on making a number of international standards freely available, which weren't necessarily freely available before the pandemic. Moving on to your question about work on a regional level as well, the excellent work of our colleagues in GulfMet has been mentioned as well, and I applaud and thank the excellent coordination that GulfMet is doing within the Gulf region. And some of these same principles hold true on a regional level as they do on an international level. A priority of mine, and certainly that of the OIML, is to see a greater alignment and coordination of priorities and operations between what happens at an international level, including through the OIML, and our regional counterparts, our regional metrology organizations and our regional legal metrology organizations, represented in the Gulf by GulfMet, as I mentioned. And I guess working with greater levels of alignment and coordination, we reduce duplication of effort. We also reduce regulatory burden and technical barriers to trade. And getting this greater level of alignment and elimination of duplication allows businesses, the private sector, to do what they do best. And that allows them to innovate and produce better and cheaper products for consumers. But, of course, we always need to do more. And we need to do more in a collective way, both regionally and also on a multilateral level. And working collaboratively, multilaterally, not only harmonizes the international systems, which was part of the question and part of the discussion for health measurements, but it also means that there is a collective response to collective needs. And pursuing a collective multilateral approach to all measurements ensures that standards are developed in a more effective, efficient, and ultimately a more cost-effective way.
Hopefully that we will not have future pandemics, but that if we do, the world will be more ready because of that experience. Engineer Al-Dal'an, we heard a bit earlier how Saudi Arabia fought the pandemic from Mr. Abdul Ali. Can you explain to us specifically the specific role played by the Saudi Food and Drug Authority in ensuring the availability, safety, and efficiency of medical devices used during the pandemic?
Thank you, Nadine, and special thanks for His Excellency Dr. Saad Al-Qasabi, the Governor of SASO, and my colleagues in SASO for having me in this forum. The Saudi and Food Drug Authority, as a regulator, play a critical role to address the pandemic on many fronts, including, for example, accelerating access to a medical device that should be safe and effective to be used for the diagnosis or the treatment or detection of the coronavirus. This goes through several scientific evaluation, since Saudi and Food Drug Authority have to make sure their decision based on scientific evidence. Saudi FDA also published many guidance for the international and local industry in how to comply with Saudi SFDA regulation and requirements that make sure the medical device going to be replaced in the market are safe and high quality. Saudi FDA has a chair for the global harmonization, which consists of 31 countries and regions. For example, China, South Korea, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Indonesia. We have a special task force in that time, so we can exchange the knowledge, experience, standard of their industry or our local industry, So this is make the decision easy for any medical device. For example, the BPEs, personal protective equipment, the IVD, especially the PCR for the virus detection, or the other support and treatment equipment, for example, ventilator, ECMO machine, syringe pump, infusion pump, etc. So this is make our life easy and our decision easy to be expedited to allow the medical device enter to the Saudi market. Saudi City also working closely with WHO, as Saudi's FDA hosted the collaborating center with the WHO. We have participated in many committee related to a medical device with the WHO. We have trained also the African forum country and share with them our experience and the standard for the medical device, especially medical device dedicated for the COVID-19. Also, the SFDA provide a guidance for the local industry and international industry, and to provide specific email address in case of any question on the or for the submission of their application or other question related if they have any challenge how to meet with the SFDA standard or SFDA requirements, either for the COVID-19 medical device or other related medical device. As Dr. Abdul Ali mentioned, we have part of the big national committee. This committee, SFDA, try to facilitate any challenge related to its requirements or the regulation. Because our aim and purpose to make sure all medical device used for the diagnosis or treatment or the prevention or protection is safe and provide the necessary, accurate, and safe result for the patient. In respect to availability, LSD support the stability and availability of the medical device in the market. We have conduct very active communication with our local industry and encourage them to increase their capacity. And really, the local industry help too much to provide the necessary personal protective equipment, for example, the medical mask. Also, we have a channel with the international industry to provide them all the necessary requirements to facilitate all the things related to the regulation or our requirements that support the safety and efficiency of medical device need to be replaced in the Kingdom market. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you, Engineer Dal'an. We heard a little bit earlier from Dr. Milton that one of the pillars of metrology for healthcare is laboratory medicine. And I would like to talk about that with Dr. Abdul Ali. Can you tell us what kind of stress did the laboratories face throughout the pandemic? And what was the role played by the Ministry of Health to enhance the technical competence of medical labs across the kingdom?
The labs are just one part of the diagnostics that are required to reach to an accurate diagnosis and then do all necessary policies and procedures and protocols and implement all the protocols that you are having and guidelines to treat the patients. But let me add and build on what Dr. Martin mentioned in his very important points related to what metrology will add and where the testing and standards will happen. In laboratories, when we go into the micro details and maybe super micro details of what the swab journey will be after taking the swab. Swab is going to be taken, but we need to ensure that the swab is appropriate. I mean, the instrument itself, taking the swab, is appropriate, and there are multiple standards and qualities required. And from there, imagine in the lab what will happen. There are multiple dilution, mixing, pipetting happening there, and cycling and thermal management and ensuring temperatures are fine, detectors and sensors and readers are okay to reach to a final appropriate accurate diagnosis within machine or outside the machine. From that moment of swapping till the final result is there on the smart device, it's a journey that requires multiple, I'm not exaggerating if saying maybe more than 10 steps. The standards and metrology will be there in one journey of a swap. Imagine if we are doing, and we are doing, in fact, more than 50,000 to 100,000 swaps and tests PCR tests per day in the kingdom since the beginning of the pandemic. We started, yes, with one lab, one central lab, one reference lab, which is under the Public Health Authority, and then expanded more than 100 labs around the kingdom certified and approved and given the accreditation to do these tests. And in weeks, we jumped from the capability of 1,000 tests per day to exceed 100,000 test capability and capacity per day. And we started with something around 55 to 60 hours average to receive the result, the turnaround time of a test. And in no time, we were capable of doing majority of tests, I mean more than 80–90% of tests within less than 24 hours. And now we are less than 12 hours. Most of the time we are between 8 and 12 hours, and there are even faster results coming from the labs. This is not happening without definitely appropriate supplies, appropriate human resources management, appropriate allocation and reallocation of resources, and appropriate standardization. In the tests, it's very crucial to see appropriate calibrations, appropriate standardization, appropriate measurement, looking at all the steps I mentioned. If we are doing 100,000 or nearly 100,000 tests per day these days, I'm talking about last week, we are reaching that amount. We are exceeding 90,000 and approaching 100,000 tests per day. And imagine if one test requires around 10 steps where we are dependent on appropriate measures and standards, then on daily basis, there are more than 1 million moments where we are dependent on standards and metrology and measures to diagnose appropriately and to save lives, to start protocols appropriately, and to isolate cases appropriately to prevent further harm or further spread and break the cycle of the transmission. These are just few views and angles to look at what's important, but radiology is a very important thing. Dr. Martin mentioned that. The ICU machines are very important thing. There are multiple sensors and thousands and 100,000s of beeps every day in the intensive care units. All these are totally dependent on what we are learning and understanding and monitored at the same time by the authorities responsible for standardization.
There is no doubt that the pandemic put immense stress on the medical sector and on national metrology institutes. Dr. Milton, can you explain to us what was the type of support that the International Bureau of Weights and Measures gave to national metrology institutes and also regional metrology institutes around the world during the pandemic?
Thank you. Yes. So when this pandemic gripped the world last February, last March, the first thing we did at the initiative of the president of the International Committee of Weights and Measures, Dr. Wayne Lau from South Africa, he initiated a call to all of the institutes in all of our member states for them to send to us information about the actions going on in member states. We put all of that information in a repository on our website. It's still there, actually. We have information from 45 national institutes. We have summaries of actions from 28 different member states. And when you look at that information, it really is an awesome impression of how quickly the metrology world responded to this crisis. And I just make a couple of comments about the information you see there. The first one is that many institutes were very quick to respond to new requests from their governments to be involved in new testing facilities for equipment that was essential for treating the global pandemic. So on one side, they became involved with testing personal protective equipment. Many labs set up new facilities in a matter of weeks to do this. On the other side, they became involved in the development of testing and engineering new ventilator equipment. So in both of those cases, national institutes worked in a new way, like Mr. Donlan said a few moments ago. This pandemic has encouraged and facilitated closer working and quicker working. So these were examples of quicker working amongst the NMIs. And we were very pleased to be able to provide coordination of information between institutes doing that work. The other large area that has really increased in importance as a result of the pandemic is to support the national institutes in terms of their role in supporting the testing. Mr. Al Abdullahi has just talked about the testing activity that you set up in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, every country set up a testing activity, and NMIs have wanted to be able to underpin those new testing activities. So what we've done is working with national institutes in Canada, in China, in the US, and in the UK. We have started 2 new comparison campaigns that enable national measurement institutes to compare their ability to make measurements of specific components essential for the PCR tests. So we have one comparison campaign for the measurements of the monoclonal antibodies. So these are the antibodies generated in response to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And the other one has been a measurement campaign, a comparison campaign to support measurements of the RNA copy number of the SARS-CoV-2 virus itself. So here, for the first time, many institutes have been able to move quickly to develop capabilities to make measurements essential for their governments, essential for the healthcare of citizens that they didn't do before. We further supported them by organizing 3 global webinars, bringing speakers in from outside the measurement community, from the expert laboratory science community, to provide an education basis for labs who were starting with these measurements. If you're interested in those webinars, you can find those on the BIPM YouTube channel. They're very, very interesting webinars with global experts each time speaking. So I think in all of these ways, we at BIPM have adapted quickly to help the member institutes in turn react quickly to what their governments were asking them to do.
I'm sorry, I had a problem with the connection. I'm not sure if I'm on again. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
I'm sorry about that. So I lost the last part of your intervention, Dr. Milton, but I'd like to continue with the conversation and go to Mr. Donnellan. We heard from Dr. Milton how the type of support that was lent to National Metrology Institute. I would like to hear from your side also. Can you explain what kind of support did the International Bureau of Legal Metrology give to legal metrology activities around the world and during the pandemic?
Thank you, Madam Honey, again for the question. I guess from my perspective as well, and from the OIML's perspective, on a technical level, in addition to developing a number of standards and delivering on what the OIML strategy is and priorities, which I should add, already included a strong focus on health and medical aspects before the pandemic, which again just goes to show I guess a number of the foresighting activities that organisations like the OIML and the BIPM have to undertake on behalf of its members to look at certain possibilities in the future. But we've also focused in this period on fast tracking a number of our, I guess, more innovative additional activities. And for example, we recently launched a new task group of interested members, partners, and other stakeholders within the OIML network to take a closer look at medical devices with a measurement function. And why are we doing this? We're doing this to ensure that the technological advances are reflected in our suite of existing international standards, but also to talk to our members, to consult, to see if there is a new international standard that is required in a particular area. Throughout the pandemic as well, the BIML and through the OIML, we've supported our members in the international legal metrology community as well through looking at some other areas. And my esteemed colleagues on the panel mentioned this as well in terms of the importance of ongoing training, learning and development as part of this process. And particularly during the pandemic, we have all been made aware of the attributes and benefits of digital learning and e-learning, and that plays a very crucial role in the successful implementation of our standards at the OIML, but also international standards more generally. And in this context, the OIML has developed various e-learning offerings. These range and are currently under development to do more and to add more value, but include informative technical discussions on health and health-related topics to more technical training activities on particular areas. And we're trying to make some of these training opportunities more available to everyone, and we're certainly open to new ideas and new requests. But I think also it's important to listen to the broader community, as I mentioned before, of technical professionals, and also professionals involved in the space outside of legal metrology, scientific metrology, and industrial metrology, including non-technical audiences and policymakers. And this has been especially important to demonstrate the important role, and indeed, and the integral role that metrology plays in the health sector, and indeed all across all industries and sectors. And Dr. Milton touched on that in terms of the demands placed by governments on national institutes, and therefore the role that international organizations play in that context is very important. But I would like to mention as well that health is not only about cures, it's also about prevention. And as well as treatment, prevention plays a vitally critical role. And what do I mean by that? In terms of prevention from the OIML's perspective, another important aspect is measuring instruments for health, and the vast array of instruments that were used in preventative health means to keep us safe and to keep us healthy, and the measurement science and the standardization that goes into them. For example, these may include gas chromatograph systems, liquid chromatographs, evidential breath analyzers, sound level meters, tire pressure gauges, and so on, load cells, etc. Now, it may seem a little odd, but they are preventative aspects if we look at health being broader than just the pandemic, and if we look at health prevention as to what will keep us safe and hopefully what would keep us out of hospital, there are a number of standards with guidance, with requirements in place to ensure that they operate safely. So as it's often said, prevention is better than cure, but I think from our organization's perspective and many organizations' perspectives, and it's been talked about earlier today, is we have to look at the whole spectrum of health, and that includes prevention, diagnosis, and treatment.
Our time is flying. I'm going to continue with our questions, but I hope that you can give us a little bit more concise answers so that we can cover some of the questions of the audience. Engineer Dalan, we were talking about laboratory medicine a little bit earlier. Can you shed light on the role of Saudi Food and Drug Authority labs in validating or testing medical devices?
Actually, all the technical decision to authorize or approve the technical medical device technical file based on the our lab testing for some kind or specific of equipment, either on the pre-market before the approval and the authorization, or the post-market surveillance when the machine located in the hospital. So the role of SFDA medical device laboratory, since we have many laboratories, we have food laboratory, we have a drug laboratory, and other laboratories. So our aim here is the medical device laboratory. If we, in the pre-market, if we have any lack of information related to the standard, because the SFDA evaluate a whole life of medical device, from the initiative, design, standard, then the medical device, clinical trial, then replaced in the market. So if there is any lack of information in the technical file related to a standard, our laboratory capable to provide all the ISO test and do the necessary testing against the ISO standard to prove is this technical file provided by the industry, all of the information data is correct, and based on it, can we build the scientific or significant evidence? Is it safe and effective or not? Also, in the post-market surveillance, if we have any complaint or concern from the health provider, for example, Ministry of Health, National Guard, other health care provider, when we receive this adverse event or the incident or concern related to a medical device, so maybe we need to collect the sample from the hospital, sent to our lab, so our lab will apply all necessary testing. Maybe we need another validation from other source, mainly the industry itself. So based on it, either we request corrective action from the industry, or we withdraw the medical device from the market. As Dr. Abdul Muhammad mentioned, he's mentioned a lot of process inside the hospital. It's really correct, because there is quality control should be applied for the IVD, which means the diagnostic the devices, the in vitro diagnostic, all laboratory lab for hematology, biochemistry, PCR for the COVID. So a lot of testing, measure, doing during the daily process in hospital. All this monitoring by LSFDA. If there is any performance problem in the device, so LSFDA will request from the hospital to inform them through the medical device reporting center in SFDA. So our report center either to request the biomedical engineer in hospital to provide them all the tracking of the maintenance, either emergency maintenance or the daily maintenance or corrective maintenance, all the history of the machine to make sure where is the problem exactly. Is it from the operation problem, end user problem, or related to machine problem? So the regulatory is important either for medical device or IVD. Another thing is important for LSFD, the national lab, CDC, mainly in the COVID-19, when we receive a technical file for the PCR. Actually, we request more than 300 sample of patient, the clinical performance, to make sure the clinical performance is accurate. This BCR can be used for the diagnosis. So if we have any lack or of information or doubt of information, so this BCR will be sent to the national lab or CDC to be tested in their lab. It's not SFDA lab, it's the clinical lab or in the hospital or CDC. So this will help us also to take a decision, is this product safe to be used or not? Thank you.
Let me try to see if you can hear me through the...
No, it's okay.
Okay, this is much better. Dr. Abdelali, let us talk about accuracy of measurement and its impact on the health sector. Can you tell us how you are cooperating with international organizations and specifically the World Health Organization to achieve that?
Thank you very much. Regarding the collaboration, whether within the kingdom or outside the kingdom, these are all happening in all health multiple sectors, because there are health providers who are not under the umbrella of Ministry of Health. There are multiple sectors participating in this, and overall we are all united and working together under umbrella of multiple components in the ecosystem of healthcare. And in the reform that's happening within our Vision 2030 and all the reforms happening and transformation happening in healthcare sector, the presence of Saudi FDA, the presence of Saudi Commission for Healthcare Professionals, the presence of the Saudi Center for Accreditation of Health Institutions, the Insurance Council, the Purchase and Insurance Program, the Vision Realization Program, the Saudi Health Council, and many others, and the recent upgrade of the CDC, Saudi CDC into the Public Health Authority with the National Health Lab that my dear engineer mentioned, Engineer Dalal mentioned a few moments ago. All these components of the health ecosystem in its new reform is working together and making all the necessary standards and guidelines together, and making also its own capabilities of doing and developing based on research and based on science, its own standards. At the same time, there are collaboration and share and mutual exchange of knowledge with international organizations. Among these are the WHO. In the WHO, there are members and scientists who are in continuous collaboration and communication with the WHO. We all the time ensure that our standards in diagnosing cases and identifying cases and labeling suspected cases, in using appropriate devices and using appropriate methodologies in lab testing and appropriate way of managing different steps in the fight against this pandemic. We are all the time ensuring that we are matching not only WHO standards, but also we are benchmarking with appropriate and comparable international organizations and international bodies and authorities like the European CDC, the US CDC, and in Southeast Asia there are also, and East Asia there are also multiple organizations we are in communication and collaboration with. So it's a global activity. We are in communication with all these countries, plus that last year in 2020 we were having the presidency of the G20, and among the activities there were lots of healthcare related activities and collaborative work. Multiple are related to the preparedness and touching the pandemia or pandemic activities, and standardization is always on the table. And by that we are having our own local capabilities and building and adding to the international efforts and standardization. plus that we are also using and ensuring that we are aligned with all internationally agreed upon and accepted methodologies.
I'm going to try to take some questions from the audience questions. Please, if you can keep the answers concise so that we can cover many of them. We have a question to Dr. Martin from the National Metrology Lab of Uganda. The question is, how do you deal with the quick innovations in the area of medical metrology?
Thank you. That's a good question. Medical metrology is a fast-moving area. Metrology as a whole deals with fast-moving areas. This year, medical metrology has been one of the fastest. So we have a foresight program, and we look ahead to see what we can anticipate with experts to be future requirements. In particular, we work very closely with the International Federation for Clinical Chemistry, the IFCC, and the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, the ILAC. We have a joint committee we call the JCTLM, a joint committee for traceability in laboratory medicine. They have a foresight activity. They have a very interesting website showing accredited reference materials and accredited reference measurement procedures. If you're interested in the future of laboratory medicine, which is a little bit of the theme today, please take a look at that jctlm.org website. On the other side, in amongst our coordination of the work of the NMIs, we coordinate them through our consultative committee on chemical measurements. They have a foresight program that's actually published on our website. Please take a look at that. There's a lot of very interesting information about where the chemical measurement community is going. They have a very detailed process for analyzing future requirements in the organic chemistry area, the protein chemistry area, all of the areas of chemistry. So please take a look at that information, which is all on our website.
There is a question to Engineer Ali Dal'an. Is there a plan for the labs of the Saudi Food and Drug Authority to cooperate with the National Metrology Institute of Saudi for the quality of the authority's lab and to enhance the oversight over the جودة الغذاء, the quality of food, and support R&D in scientific research?
Thank you, Nadine. Actually, all medical devices associated with a measuring unit should be complied with Saudi metrology law. Therefore, all this measurement unit should be expressed in the IS International System for Unit. So this is already in our regulation, and of course we are happy to work together with the SASU for such this requirements. Also, this helps Saudi Arabia to be harmonized with the international standard and the requirements.
Question to, I think that since we mentioned now scientific research, let's go to that topic. And Mr. Donnellan, I'd like to ask you about R&D and measurements relating to the healthcare sector. They were important, extremely important really during the pandemic. What was the role of OIML in that aspect? And can the partnership with the World Health Organization enrich these activities?
Thank you, Nadine. In terms of the WHO, certainly it can, but in terms of, I guess, the role of, and I'll come to that in a moment briefly, in terms of the role of research and development, it plays a crucial role, and quite frankly, a lot of the innovation, the research and development that occurs within the international community, the regional community, but also national measurement institutes and also subnational levels of government, because a lot of the healthcare provision in a number of economies are in fact provided by subnational governments or regional provincial governments. And that research and development that occurs both within government, the private sector, non-for-profits, and also universities and academia is extremely important in terms of the high-level scientific metrology. That then cascades down in terms of the measuring instruments and how industry responds to that and incorporates those new innovations, those new methodologies, those new practices in the instruments that they create. That then feeds into the standards that the OIML develops and through its members, which is done through our technical committees and subcommittees and project groups. So there is a nice continuum in terms of the research and development that occurs at a very high level, as I said, through governments, academia, and business, through to international standards. So they drive the international standards, and the international standards from a legal metrology perspective also create a level playing field for that innovation to occur. Your second point, Nadine, in terms of the WHO, the OIML, and I know a number of other international organizations and national bodies enjoy a very productive, collaborative and professional relationship with the WHO, and this has existed in the OIML sense for a number of years. It's not a new thing. And we certainly deeply value the insight and the policy and the technical advice that the WHO provides. But there is always room for developing that further, enhancing that relationship. And I think, as I mentioned before, one of the areas that the OIML is now looking at is a more holistic look at its suite of international harmonized standards in the medical field. And we welcome the WHO's input into that, as we do a number of other international organizations and national measurement institutes, including those from Saudi Arabia. So it's a very collaborative process. It is something we do always have to look at carefully as well, because any measuring instrument is important, but particularly those that have a health function. You're talking about people's lives, so we do take it very carefully and very methodically.
Our time is up, but let us close with Dr. Milton. Very quickly, what is the role of the IPM in supporting scientific metrology in the fields of medical measurement and related R&D activities to face future pandemics, to be readier for the future?
Yes, as we discussed earlier, I think foresighting is very important. We are an international organization, and our role is fundamentally coordination. So we listen to and then we work with the national institutes in the member states, and we hear from them what their priorities are. Prior to this pandemic, there was great enthusiasm in the medical world in working in fields such as precision medicine and cell measurements. But we have to say that the world of medical research has probably taken a deep breath and looked again at what the priorities will be in the future. It would be a brave person who sat here today and said anything other than the measurements associated with virus control and of the associated pharmaceuticals. These are going to be probably the greatest priority, and that's the area that our programs are working to support most strongly in the near future.
I hope that the lessons are learned and we are better ready for any such future event, hoping that it does not occur in our lifetime. Unfortunately, our time is up. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us. To all the participants, thank you for joining, for listening in, and I hope you found the conversations interesting. I want to mention that we have a large number of questions coming in, so please send your questions. I will give you 2 email addresses. I hope that you can all send your questions to those email addresses and they will be answered. The first email is a.mohammed@eventat.sa. This is the email that you received in the confirmation for your registration. It's a.mohammed@eventat, eventat.sa. And there's another email, k.abdelfatah@saso.gov.sa. That's k.abdelfatah@saso.gov.sa. So you can send your questions to those email addresses and they will be answered. On that note, thank you very much for this session, for joining us, and I hand it over to the MC again, Mr. Mfarrih Al-Shaqiqi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
شكرا للأستاذة نادين هاني، شكرا لكل ضيوفها، شكرا لكل ما قدموا في هذه الجلسة. نذكركم بعنوانها القياس من أجل الصحة. سنستريح الآن للحظات وبعدها نعاود اللقاء بكم. شكرا لحضوركم افتتاح هذا المنتدى واستماعكم إلى هذه الجلسة، وبعد هذه الاستراحة سنعاود اللقاء بكم.
شكرا.
Imagine a world of future with enterprising ambitions, a world that unfolds new avenues of prosperity to stimulate the patterns of growth and to formulate new economic notions, innovating and investing resources effectively to build structures of time that facilitate the lives of people while leading up to a higher standard of economic growth, further rising and shining to maintain premier quality benchmarks, and putting in play the right majestic mix in these trending times that makes a competitive advantage in international trade, bringing in shape an industry that thrives with confidence and composure to unlock the highest sense of security and comfort. This story is of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that encapsulates a world of industrial revolution with quality and standardization at the core of its belief. A story that reflects through its quality of food, standard of medication, and immaculate digital infrastructure. A nation with vibrant spirit, having gone into a groundbreaking industrial revolution while breaking through in the telecommunications sector to facilitate the future generations with an exceptional experience of life in this era of artificial intelligence. All because of the active contribution of its institutions that have monitored and measured the greatest levels of efficiency and accuracy at all levels. This is Saudi Arabia, a land that has created the impossible with some incredible records to give visitors a unique experience of history and future.
في يوم 7 فبراير عام 1904 تقريبا الساعة 11 صباحاً صح سكان مدينة بالتيمور الأمريكية على حريق ضخم في أكبر مباني المدينة، وبشكل سريع وصلت لموقع الحريق 24 سيارة إطفاء، وباشروا رجال الإطفاء في التعامل مع الحريق، لكن بالرغم من جهودهم انتشرت النيران في المبنى والمباني اللي جنبه. وقتها أدركت السلطات في الولاية أنهم لازم يستعينون بدعم الولايات القريبة منهم، وبدأوا بالمساندة في إخماد الحريق. لكن حصل شيء ما كان في الحسبان، اكتشفوا أن الوصلة اللي تربط خرطوم المياه بأنابيب الضخ من السيارات اللي كانت قادمة من الولايات الثانية ما كانت على نفس المقاس، وهذا الشيء أثر على أدائهم في عملية الإنقاذ. حاول المسؤولين ورجال الإطفاء التصرف وإنقاذ ما تبقى من الموقف، وجتهم فكرة أنهم يلفون الوصلة بقطعة قماش، بس للأسف الحيلة ما كانت نافعة، ومع قوة الرياح وبسبب عدم كفاءة الأدوات انتشر الحريق لمساحات أكبر في مشهد كارثي. ومع ذلك استمرت الجهود في إخماد الحريق، وبدأوا بتكوين جدار مائي من أحد الشلالات القريبة من مكان الحريق. أخذ منهم التنفيذ 30 ساعة متواصلة، وقدروا بعدها ينقذون المدينة من دمار شامل. الآن يجي السؤال المهم، هل مثل هذه المواقف البطولية راح تنقذنا دايم؟ وهل كنا نقدر نتجنب هالكوارث لو كان في توحيد لشكل ومقاسات الأدوات اللي نستخدمها في حياتنا علشان ما تخذلنا وقت الحاجة؟ الحادثة هذه لفتت نظر الجهات المسؤولة والمجتمع لضرورة وجود مواصفات ومقاييس محددة للمنتجات والخدمات، وبدأ العالم ينتبه لضرورة التغيير لتطوير مواصفات قياسية لكثير من المنتجات والخدمات. حتى صار اليوم في معظم دول العالم جهات وطنية مهمتها إصدار المواصفات القياسية وتضمن أن المنتج سهل الاستخدام وآمن علينا كمستهلكين. وعندنا في السعودية مثلا أكثر من 30,000 مواصفة قياسية أصدرتها هيئة المواصفات. قصة حريق بالتيمور كانت بداية نبهت المسؤولين والمختصين إلى أن التقييس أصبح ضرورة حتمية لحياة الفرد واستمرار المجتمع ودعم الاقتصاد والصناعة. وصار الالتزام بمتطلبات هذا المجال مطلب ومعيار مهم لمطابقة المنتجات للمواصفات والمقاييس المطلوبة واعتماد دخولها أو تداولها في السوق المحلي.
بنسألك سؤال بسيط، جاهز؟ كم الساعة؟ صعبة شوي؟ طيب نجرب مرة ثانية. كم الساعة؟ لسه؟ طيب الحين أحسن صح؟ هذه ساعة سهل قراءتها لأنك تعودت عليها. بأي مكان في العالم تقدر تعرف الساعة كم. المواصفات والمقاييس هي التي جعلت الساعة اللي عندك وبأمريكا وبالهند نفس الساعة. هي اللي حددت أن الساعة تقسم ل 12 رقم 12 يكون فوق و6 يكون تحت. الساعة مثال، أفياش الكهرباء، فتحات البنزين، وحدات القياس وغيرها كلها مصممة وفقاً لمواصفات قياسية معينة. المنظمة الدولية للمقاييس آيزو أصدرت أكثر من 25,000 مواصفة. فكر مثلاً ببطاقة البنك، في مواصفة حددت أبعادها بالضبط، والنتيجة أي مكان في العالم بطاقتك تقدر تستخدمها. حتى المحافظ صممت بشكل يناسب هذه البطاقة. من يحدد هذه المواصفات؟ في كل دولة توجد جهة تحددها. في السعودية مثلاً هيئة المواصفات والمقاييس السعودية هذا دورها، تجتمع مع الجهات الأخرى حول العالم وتحدد المواصفات المناسبة للصناعات المختلفة. هدف هذه المواصفات أنها تضمن أن أي منتج يوصلك يحقق متطلبات الجودة، يكون أكثر أماناً وأكيد سهل الاستخدام. والحين من جديد نسأل، الساعة كم؟ بنسألك سؤال بسيط.
Imagine a world of future with enterprising ambitions, a world that unfolds new avenues of prosperity to stimulate the patterns of growth and to formulate new economic notions, innovating and investing resources effectively to build structures of time that facilitate the lives of people while leading up to a higher standard of economic growth, further rising and shining to maintain premier quality benchmarks. and putting in play the right majestic mix in these trending times that makes a competitive advantage in international trade. Bringing in shape an industry that thrives with confidence and composure to unlock the highest sense of security and comfort. This story is of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that encapsulates a world of industrial revolution with quality and standardization at the core of its belief. A story that reflects through its quality of food, standard of medication, and immaculate digital infrastructure. A nation with vibrant spirit, having gone into a groundbreaking industrial revolution while breaking through in the telecommunications sector to facilitate the future generations with an exceptional experience of life in this era of artificial intelligence. All because of the active contribution of its institutions that have monitored and measured the greatest levels of efficiency and accuracy at all levels. This is Saudi Arabia, a land that has created the impossible with some incredible records to give visitors a unique experience of history and future.
في يوم 7 فبراير عام 1904 تقريبا الساعة 11 صباحاً صح سكان مدينة بالتيمور الأمريكية على حريق ضخم في أكبر مباني المدينة، وبشكل سريع وصلت لموقع الحريق 24 سيارة إطفاء، وباشروا رجال الإطفاء في التعامل مع الحريق، لكن بالرغم من جهودهم انتشرت النيران في المبنى والمباني اللي جنبه. وقتها أدركت السلطات في الولاية أنهم لازم يستعينون بدعم الولايات القريبة منهم، وبدأوا بالمساندة في إخماد الحريق. لكن حصل شيء ما كان في الحسبان، اكتشفوا أن الوصلة اللي تربط خرطوم المياه بأنابيب الضخ من السيارات اللي كانت قادمة من الولايات الثانية ما كانت على نفس المقاس، وهذا الشيء أثر على أدائهم في عملية الإنقاذ. حاول المسؤولين ورجال الإطفاء التصرف وإنقاذ ما تبقى من الموقف، وجتهم فكرة أنهم يلفون الوصلة بقطعة قماش، بس للأسف الحيلة ما كانت نافعة، ومع قوة الرياح وبسبب عدم كفاءة الأدوات انتشر الحريق لمساحات أكبر في مشهد كارثي. ومع ذلك استمرت الجهود في إخماد الحريق، وبدأوا بتكوين جدار مائي من أحد الشلالات القريبة من مكان الحريق. أخذ منهم التنفيذ 30 ساعة متواصلة، وقدروا بعدها ينقذون المدينة من دمار شامل. الآن يجي السؤال المهم، هل مثل هذه المواقف البطولية راح تنقذنا دايم؟ وهل كنا نقدر نتجنب هالكوارث لو كان في توحيد لشكل ومقاسات الأدوات اللي نستخدمها في حياتنا علشان ما تخذلنا وقت الحاجة؟ الحادثة هذه لفتت نظر الجهات المسؤولة والمجتمع لضرورة وجود مواصفات ومقاييس محددة للمنتجات والخدمات، وبدأ العالم ينتبه لضرورة التغيير لتطوير مواصفات قياسية لكثير من المنتجات والخدمات. حتى صار اليوم في معظم دول العالم جهات وطنية مهمتها إصدار المواصفات القياسية وتضمن أن المنتج سهل الاستخدام وآمن علينا كمستهلكين. وعندنا في السعودية مثلاً أكثر من 30,000 مواصفة قياسية أصدرتها هيئة المواصفات. قصة حريق بالتيمور كانت بداية نبهت المسؤولين والمختصين إلى أن التقييس أصبح ضرورة حتمية لحياة الفرد واستمرار المجتمع ودعم الاقتصاد والصناعة، وصار الالتزام بمتطلبات هذا المجال مطلب ومعيار مهم لمطابقة المنتجات للمواصفات والمقاييس المطلوبة واعتماد دخولها أو تداولها في السوق المحلي.
بنسألك سؤال بسيط، جاهز؟ كم الساعة؟ صعبة شوي؟ طيب نجرب مرة ثانية. كم الساعة؟ لسه؟ طيب الحين أحسن صح؟ هذه ساعة سهل قراءتها لأنك تعودت عليها. بأي مكان في العالم تقدر تعرف الساعة كم. المواصفات والمقاييس هي التي جعلت الساعة اللي عندك وبأمريكا وبالهند نفس الساعة. هي اللي حددت أن الساعة تقسم ل 12 رقم 12 يكون فوق و6 يكون تحت. الساعة مثال، أفياش الكهرباء، فتحات البنزين، وحدات القياس وغيرها كلها مصممة وفقاً لمواصفات قياسية معينة. المنظمة الدولية للمقاييس آيزو أصدرت أكثر من 25,000 مواصفة. فكر مثلاً ببطاقة البنك، في مواصفة حددت أبعادها بالضبط، والنتيجة أي مكان في العالم في طاقتك تقدر تستخدمها. حتى المحافظ صممت بشكل يناسب هذه البطاقة. من يحدد هذه المواصفات؟ في كل دولة توجد جهة تحددها. في السعودية مثلا هيئة المواصفات والمقاييس السعودية هذا دورها، تجتمع مع الجهات الأخرى حول العالم وتحدد المواصفات المناسبة للصناعات المختلفة. هدف هذه المواصفات أنها تضمن أن أي منتج يوصلك يحقق متطلبات الجودة، يكون أكثر أماناً وأكيد سهل الاستخدام. والحين من جديد نسأل، الساعة كم؟
We established a system that employs quality in our standards. Because of the importance of measurement and calibration, and because it's one of the most important activities of Saudi Standards, Metrology and Quality Organization, and for the sake of the Kingdom leadership and its interest in calibration and measurement since ancient time, the National Measurement and Calibration Center, NMCC, was established in 1986 to be the national authority concerned with establishing, preserving, and developing measurement standards. For one standard, one measurement, and one acceptable report by National Measurement Standards, in 2011, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia signed the document to join the Meter Agreement and to facilitate the establishment of cooperation relations between the legal standards authorities in the member states. The Kingdom has also joined the International Organization for Legal Metrology and its participating committees. Nowadays, the National Metrology Institute of Saudi Arabia has 30 specialized national laboratories. It contributes to the services of scientific, legal, and industrial metrology to support all relevant sectors. The center is equipped with primary and secondary measuring standards and advanced measuring equipment and systems managed by national technical competencies with the highest level of expertise in the various fields of measurement and calibration. They were trained, qualified in highest level to attribute measurement outcomes to the International System of Units, SI. The center played a vital role in the National Transformation Program by spearheading an initiative that offered legal calibration services for the verification tools used, as well as attribution to national and international references for those tools. The center has essential contributions to the protection of environment, health, and safety, and this is our title today at the International Metrology Forum 2021.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، ومرحبا بكم مرة أخرى في الاستكمال فعاليات المنتدى الدولي للقياس، والذي تنظمه المملكة العربية السعودية ممثلة بالهيئة السعودية للمواصفات والمقاييس والجودة والمركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة، تزامنا مع الاحتفال باليوم العالمي للقياس لعام 2021 تحت شعار القياس من أجل الصحة. ونستكمل فعاليات المنتدى بورش عمل متخصصة. وقبل أن نبدأ الورش نود أن نلفت عنايتكم لأن هناك إيميلين وصلتكم عن طريق الإيميل تأكيد التسجيل، وهي الآن ظاهرة على الشاشة. فسيكون في نهاية كل ورشة تقريبا 10 دقائق للإجابة على أسئلتكم، فرجاء إرسال هذه الأسئلة للمحاضرتين أو الورشتين القادمتين على هذين الإيميلين الذين ظاهران على الشاشة. Please send your questions to these two emails for the next two workshops. Thank you very much for your interaction with this forum. Now it gives me a great pleasure to invite His Excellency Dr. Graham Mashin from the National Institution of Metrology in the UK. So the floor is yours, Dr. Mashin.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thank you very much for your kind invitation to speak at this very important event, the 2021 International Metrology Forum. And I'm really going to focus mainly on body temperature measurement and fever screening, because that's been really important over the last sort of 15 or 20 months or so during the COVID pandemic, But I just also want to say a few words at the beginning about some aspects of the impact of metrology on health. And my colleague Martin Milton's already spoken a few things about that already. So I'll say a few words about NPL, and then I'll give a few words about the impact of metrology in a general sense, about nuclear medicine, acoustics, multiscale tumor mapping as well. And then I really want to give a case study of the impact of metrology in body temperature measurement. And I think that's really been very important over the last 12 to 15 months or so, both in fever screening practice, but it's also highlighted issues with routine clinical pathology practice as well. So just to say a few words about the National Physical Laboratory. As we know, it's the United Kingdom's National Measurement Institute. It was founded in 1900. We're responsible to make sure that all physical quantities are realised and disseminated appropriately in the United Kingdom. There's over 800, nearly 1,000 metrology specialists spread across 3 sites, mainly in Teddington, in southwest London, but also in Glasgow and Huddersfield as well. This is a picture of our nice new building in Teddington. So let's say a few words about the general impact of metrology in health. I want to speak about 3 main areas. The first one is radiotherapy. I'm not going to say very much about this, but of course you only need to think for a moment to see how important metrology standards are in radiotherapy. If you get the dose wrong, of course that could have serious health implications in its own right. Either you don't get the right dose or you get too strong a dose. So radiotherapy, linking back to the traceable primary standards of the Becquerel, is really important in radiotherapy to make sure that accurate dosimetry is performed. And most of us, I guess, know people who have actually had radiotherapy in the last 2 years or so. So we also at MPL are also quite active in making phantoms for radiotherapy. So there's a paper there talking about one of the phantoms we've been working in. Acoustics is a very interesting field. It's, as it says, it's the second most commonly used diagnostic imaging technique after X-rays. The NPL is very central to make sure medical ultrasound is done correctly, because over 90% or around 90% of the world's measurements for medical ultrasound are traceable back to NPL. So that's a very important piece of work for us. And ultrasound after X-rays is the most frequently applied imaging technique in the UK and also very, very active around the world as well, and growing very rapidly. Now, that's just in imaging. For its use in therapy, it's also growing very rapidly as well. It's routinely now used for physiotherapy, but particularly for dealing with kidney stones, which can be a very serious problem for people, and to break those up so they come out of the body harmlessly is really important. But it's also grown in a wide number of other ranges of diseases for therapeutic applications as well. And you see here it says that more than 70 diseases are treated that way. And I think one of the really important ones is, for instance, prostate cancer has been dealt with using ultrasound. But this is, of course, really important to get standardization correct. If you look here, for instance, temperature elevation quite rapidly of 4 degrees C above baseline, just for 1 minute exposure. And that can have quite significant health implications. So it's very important that these things are highly regulated to make sure that the standards are in place, that therapeutic ultrasound and just ultrasound for imaging is used in an appropriate and safe manner. And so there's a number of standards that are in place, and that MPL, as I say, is central to making sure ultrasound is done in an effective way. Just one last thing, in a general sense, you can see MPL has been very much involved in this Cancer Research UK Grand Challenge, which is a really significant project looking at tumours all the way from the macroscopic whole tumour level right down to the molecular level in a number of important tumours, such as breast and pancreatic, colorectal as well. And that really is to really grow our understanding of the, in a sense, life cycle of the tumour, so as to help develop novel and new methods of attacking these tumours, which are really important ones, which still need significant work on to deal with. And so we've been looking at those in a various range of multimodal imaging applications, all the way down, as I say, from the whole tumour down to the molecular level. So that just gives you a sort of very brief flavour, and you've heard from the other speakers as well, of how metrology is really impacting the health sector. But today, I really want to speak about body temperature measurement, and is body temperature measurement and the fever screening that we have done during the pandemic, is it fit for purpose? Is it fit for purpose? And I'd like to sort of talk about that in the rest of my talk today. Please do feel free to ask questions about it. Hopefully you don't need convincing that reliable body temperature measurement in a healthcare setting is important, and I'll come back to that later on in my talk. I'm going to speak nearly exclusively about the non-contact clinical thermometers that are used, particularly forehead thermometers. I'll speak a lot about that. I also want to say a bit about thermal images, because they've been used for scanning in fever screening situations, and ear thermometers as well. I want to say why it's important, why we solve these problems, and metrology has a key role in helping solve these problems. And I want to speak about some of the international activities going on, led through the CIPM CCT committee on body temperature measurement. There's an open access paper which talks about some of these things, and you can just download it from that website. That was just published a few months ago. So I hope you'll agree that body temperature measurement is a fundamental measurement for assessing human health. It deals with the patient journey all the way from hospital admission to being discharged back into the community. Once you're in the hospital, your temperature is routinely measured in a well-controlled clinical setting. And of course, temperature measurement is really important for fever screening to prevent spread of infection. For instance, during pandemics, we don't need to be told about that, how it permits or restricts access to critical infrastructure like hospitals, like schools, like power stations, giving passage through immigration control and so forth. It's really, really important. And then it's also important for building part of building a score when you're diagnosing and assigning treatment pathways for people with particular illnesses, particularly things like sepsis, and other people like immune-compromised patients, for instance, if you've had your immunity compromised through chemotherapy. Those ones in bold are the ones we're going to focus a bit more on, particularly the fever screening. These are critical one-off measurements. They can seriously impact people's lives, can't they? If you just think about it, if a thermometer at a point of entry says you have a fever, that can mean you're not allowed to go to your workplace, not allowed to go into shops, you can't go through immigration, you have to go to a separate place, you can't get access to some forms of medical care like dentistry, you can't get to your education, you're forced to self-isolate, certainly in the UK. So getting a wrong temperature measurement that says you've got a fever could have had very serious implications, particularly at the early point of the pandemic before testing was available. And of course, it also can lead to choices to life-changing treatment pathways. If you have sepsis and the thermometer tells you haven't got sepsis, then because you've got a lower temperature than the threshold, you don't get the antibiotics you need. That can lead to increased morbidity. So that's really important to sort that out as well. But I really want to sort out that these measurements here, these measurements for fever screening and triaging in public health settings are often done very poorly. And I really want to explore why that is and why metrology has answers to that question. I really think back to what it used to be like in the 1980s. Clinical thermometers were nearly all mercury and glass. They worked, or they were broken. They were manufactured to very clear standards. And then they were very quickly phased out in the mid-1980s due to concerns of mercury toxicity, which are very real, and replaced with a rather wide range of different types of thermometers that can be used. And the question is, are all these types of thermometers equivalent? Well, the answer is, of course, no, they're not. And the reason why I put a question mark, for instance, on thermal imaging is that actual thermal imagers aren't really thermometers at all. They're really more radiance measurement devices that you can get a temperature out if you try very hard, as I'll come back to in a few minutes. So I want to speak about these three types of non-contact clinical thermometers: forehead or skin type thermometers, thermal imagers, which of course I said are really not really thermometers at all, and ear thermometers or tympanic thermometers. So just to say how these things work, just in case you're not sure, that's a picture of the sun. I'm afraid we haven't seen the sun very much in the UK for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's been a very miserable May. I'm sure you've seen the sun a lot more in Saudi Arabia than we have. These thermometers work by measuring the thermal radiation that's emitted from surfaces. It measures that thermal radiation. So the sun's surface is about 5,700 degrees Celsius. So that's so it shines by virtue of its temperature. As the temperature goes down, the emission shifts into the red and then the infrared. And below 550 degrees Celsius, you don't see it glowing anymore, but the surface is still glowing, excuse me, but it's in the infrared. And these forehead and skin thermometers, infrared thermometers, thermal imagers, they measure that emitted thermal radiation and see to use that to infer a temperature. So you'll be familiar with this picture, I'm sure. You'll maybe had your temperature taken in various different ways in different places using this type of device. There are many different types of infrared forehead thermometers. They are good to use in a sense because you don't touch anyone, so they're good from an infection control point of view. There are some good manufacturers out there who seek to conform to clinical thermometer standards. And I say as far as practical because the clinical thermometer standards are still trying to catch up with this innovation and they need some work to really do proper standardization for forehead thermometry. And again, that's a point I'll come back to a little bit later. Sadly, a lot of not such good manufacturers jumped on the COVID-19 bandwagon and repurposed their industrial devices to say they were body temperature devices. And that really gave even the clinical manufacturers a bad name. And I think there are two main issues which I want to explore briefly about forehead thermometers. It's how they're used to get the best out of them and the measurement site itself. So for instance, how they're used. So you're really supposed to get very close to the forehead to get a small spot in the center of the forehead. So you can see this illustrated here. But sadly, people try and move further away. Maybe you'd expect that to try and keep away from the patient. And that unfortunately means you capture some of the hair as well as the forehead. And the hair usually, certainly in the UK, is cooler. And so you nearly always measure a low temperature with this type of device, missing fevers that maybe the person has got. Sometimes you measure even further away. And in that situation, you're actually measuring the wall behind or the environment behind, as well as the forehead, as well as the hair. And who knows what temperature you actually are measuring if you're too far away. So this is a really important thing to note when you're using forehead thermometers to get the distance right. So this, for instance, I just pulled off some promotional material by one manufacturer, is not credible. You can't actually measure forehead temperature temperatures so far away. This is actually just a simulated picture and faked really. And that's really disappointing. This device is actually just a repurposed industrial thermometer being touted as a body temperature measurement device. And then, of course, you need to have a clear line of sight. You need to, I don't have a problem moving my hair out of the way because I haven't got that much in my forehead. But in schools around the UK and in various places where they've been trying to let people into places of work, they've been using forehead thermometers, and of course, they haven't moved the hair. And so you're measuring the hair temperature and not the actual skin temperature. And so that would give completely the wrong answer and again, almost certainly a low temperature, so allowing people in who will have fevers. And of course, reflected thermal radiation is important. The skin emissivity is quite high, so it emits about 0.98. That means about 2% of the thermal radiation that the device measures is reflected from outside. If you're in a very cold environment, or conversely in a very warm environment, and that reflected thermal radiation, that can skew your reading one way or the other, depending on what the environment is like. So that's also a very important consideration when you're using these devices as well. I think probably the more important one, which maybe we don't think about, is the forehead actually isn't really that representative of body temperature itself. It's significantly influenced by ambient conditions from a physiological point of view, and cold weather. Not just can you get reflected cold radiation below ambient radiation, the cold weather can actually lower the forehead temperature by several degrees Celsius. And I've had several people report to me that they've had their temperature measured with a forehead thermometer, and it's been below, say, 33 degrees Celsius. Which really you should be dead if it's below 33 degrees Celsius, but they were alive and kicking. And that's because they'd been outside in the cold weather in the UK. So you really need to let someone acclimatise for at least 15 minutes in an ambient environment, before a sensible ambient environment, before you use a forehead thermometer. But even if you do that, it's important to keep in mind that the forehead is not demonstrably representative of body temperature. There's a very important paper published about 12 months ago now by my colleague Bolton. Again, it's available by this link, who reviewed all the published literature for infrared forehead thermometers. And he really found that it's not a suitable replacement for all antitympanic thermometers in clinical practice, which is a very significant finding. And he also found that they do not detect fever accurately. This is quoted from his paper. It says the evidence suggested that they are not acceptable methods for detecting inside the normothermic range, outside the normal body temperature range, and do not detect fever accurately. That's really important thing to find out. Both temporal artery and also non-contact infrared thermometers, at least the published evidence at the moment, seems to suggest that they're not suitable for fever screening and for body temperature measurement in general. So really, just to summarise forehead thermometers, they're widely used. I'm sure many of you have seen them used. They're widely misused, particularly too far away from the subject, or no clear line of sight because of hair and so forth, or used in very variable or inappropriate ambient conditions. But even if they are used according to the instructions of the manufacturer, for a one-off measurement in public health settings, environmental and physiological effects can really severely impact the result, and often they read lower than they ought to do. The current clinical assessment in that refereed paper shows they're negative. So really the current conclusion is that forehead, and by implication any other form of skin measurement, such as the wrist, which I've also seen as well, are not generally liable for fever screening in public spaces. So what about thermal imaging? Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, remote thermal imaging was used widely, or suggested widely, that it could remotely detect fevers and be a first line of defense against COVID-19. Thermal imaging of skin for body temperature measurement just has the same challenges as forehead thermometry. It's just the same technique, it used the same methods, but it has additional difficulties. You have to measure multiple moving targets in a varying thermal environment as well. So it's actually not as simple as it might look. This, for instance, is actually, I hesitate to say, but probably a random number generator generating these numbers. Fevers can't really be detected in this simple way. It's not actually possible using thermal imagers. There is a way of possibly doing it. There's an international standard which I helped write actually nearly 15 years ago now for airport screening, and it mandates the use of the inner canthus, which is this part of the eye, to opportunity to measure body temperature. Now, that was a compromise. There was some published evidence to show that the inner calf thigh temperature had some relation to body temperature measurement, but there is still some work needing doing to establish that formal relationship between inner calf thigh temperature and core body temperature by reliable traceable thermometry. That work still needs to be done. So if you're looking for something to do, that would be a really good piece of work to do, as long as it's done to reliable, traceable black body references. So what about fever screening with thermal imaging? I think it's unlikely to be effective on its own. The current best practice that's used is you use a thermal imager with a threshold. It detects suspect fevers, then you confirm that with a calibrated clinical thermometer. This is what the standard in Singapore mandates, and I think that's probably the best you can do at the moment. But I think there is some promise that you could potentially use thermal imaging alone with the right standardization in place and the right in situ validation of the images by linking the inner calf thigh temperature to body temperature, but that link still needs to be definitively established, at least in a traceable way. I think it's interesting to see that the UK Medical Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency got very serious about this about the middle of last year. And it released a press release, so very widely available, it very rarely does this. It said, don't rely on temperature screening products for detecting coronavirus as the MHRA. It says that these products which made direct claims to screen for COVID-19 are not a reliable way for detecting the virus. And the actual agency is saying to manufacturing suppliers not to make such claims. And if they made these claims, they're going to take formal enforcement action. That means they're going to take them to court and possibly fine them or possibly even imprison them if they continue to make fictitious claims like this. So that's a really serious thing that the MHRA very rarely does. So that was a very important step forward, I think. Just a few words about ear thermometry, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Ear thermometers should work reliably because there's actually a direct relation to core body temperature, linking the blood flow of the hypothalamus to the tympanic membrane and the inner lower ear canal. All those are blood supply is supplied well from the hypothalamus. So ear thermometers, if you can actually get down to measure the thermal radiation from that part of the ear, should be good devices. When they're made, there's a clinical standard which says their accuracy should be plus or minus 0.3, in some regions even plus or minus 0.2 in the normal range of use. You have to keep in mind that undoubtedly, when they're used regularly in hospital or clinical environments, that uncertainty will grow. They're not perfect devices, not like liquid and glass thermometers where you would use them and they would continue to work reliably year after year until they broke. These devices do need to have periodic checking to make sure that they continue to work reliably. And they need to be checked obviously against traceable standards. So if the manufacturer gives you a standard or sells you a standard to calibrate your device against, you must make sure that that is traceably calibrated to your national reference. There are of course problems with the site. If you can't get a clear view of the tympanic membrane with wax or fluid in the way, that can severely impact the result. And some people's ear canal geometry is quite severe. So you can see here the slight curvature. Sometimes people's ear canal is very curved, and that can cause significant problems as well. But it is the most well understood and reliable non-contact body temperature measurement device. Let's say a few words why this is important. I hope you realise it's important already. At the beginning of the pandemic, before mass testing was available, fever screening was actually really the only way to really try and restrict the spread of the pandemic, apart from locking everyone down, which is what governments did around the world. And that's really because body temperature measurement, or in one part, body temperature measurement was found wanting and couldn't do what people expected it to do. Now, okay, every death by COVID is an absolute tragedy. But imagine if something in a future pandemic, that one which was much more deadly than the one we have at the moment. For instance, if Ebola got out into the community, more than 40% of people who catch it die. You'd really want to use every tool in your armory to prevent its spread, but you'd really want body temperature measurement to be working properly. So I think we need to act now to make sure reliable fever screening is available for any future pandemics. And also in healthcare settings, I think it's the COVID-19 crisis that actually highlighted that actually there's a wide range of body temperature measurement devices used in healthcare settings, and they're variable both in their quality and in their performance. And because of the great variety, they cause a lot of confusion to nurses and clinicians, really. And I was talking to a healthcare worker educator a few months ago, and she said to me this quote. She said, because of the difficulties in measuring temperature, it is not generally even worth taking. And actually, I was quite shocked by that, because that's someone who educates healthcare workers. And she said, because there's such a confusion, and because it's so difficult to do reliable measurement in temperature, it's not really worth taking anymore. And that's a tragedy, and really serious for people who've got immunocompromised illnesses, who've got sepsis and things like that. We really need to improve the patient journey through a healthcare setting, so that we get reliable diagnosis and treatment, particularly for serious, rapidly progressing illnesses like sepsis and meningitis. And actually, I think that body temperature measurement, the issues with it, have led to a rise in avoidable deaths, and may even be contributing to the rise in antibiotic resistance around the world as well, where people are given antibiotics because they've got fevers, when actually the problem is the device, not the fact that people have got fevers. So there's a lot of issues that need to be improved in the coming months and years. From a simple point of view, and this is in my paper, these things can be done right now to improve the situation. You just need to show that the clinical thermometer is actually fit for purpose. And sadly, there are thermometers out in the health system that aren't fit for purpose. So you need to take a step back and get external validation and approval for them, not just rely on the CE marking. You need to make sure they remain fit for purpose while they're used, which means regular traceable calibration. And again, that's not uniformly done. Certainly in the UK, it's not uniformly done. And then all the users need to be trained in use of those thermometers, and that guidelines need to be followed. And again, because of the very wide variety of thermometers at the moment in use, it's hard for the users. So by reducing the diversity to just having the ones that are really appropriate, and then training users appropriately in that, you can actually get back to probably what we used to have with liquid and glass thermometers. So there's quite a lot of work to do there as well. And then just want to say a few words in the last part of my talk about some of the international things that we've been doing. The Consultative Committee of Thermometry, which is one of the consultative committees of the CIPM, which is the highest global authority on temperature measurement. We established, well, it's only just under a year ago, we established a task group for body temperature measurement. And our real focus is trying to improve non-contact body temperature measurements, both ear thermometry, forehead thermometry, and thermal imaging, to try and establish reliable clinical thermometry on a global basis using these methods. It's a really ambitious goal, and I think it's something that we can really make a big difference to. Sorry about all the words on this. Let me just talk you through it. Just to say, we've only really been going for less than a year, and we're working on these four main areas. We've set up a key comparison of the calibration systems of the body temperature thermometers, ear and forehead to begin with, and then later thermal images, just to make sure there's the reliable metrological foundation in the national measurement institutes around the world for calibrating these systems. So that should start its measurement system, measurements in September 2021 and run for the next 2 years or so. The next thing is we're collecting current best practice for body temperature scanning around the world in health services and airports and other screening, and developing some best practice to come out of the CCT for this type of screening. And we're in good shape to give a first draft of that in August this year. We've also been looking at ear thermometers, best practice for ear thermometers and forehead thermometers as well. And we've developed some best practice guidance for that, and that's with the CCT now currently for review before it goes to clinicians for review as well. So I hope to launch that publicly before the end of this year. And I think most importantly, we're trying to interact more closely with standards bodies, because the standards at the moment are not really fit for purpose from a metrological point of view. They don't really incorporate metrological best practice in the standards. And so as they come up for revision, we're trying to get metrologists from the different regions to join the standards board clinical thermometry standards to ensure that reliable metrology is put into those standards, so that this problem that we have at the moment can be addressed through the manufacture of the devices right at source. So in summary, you've seen that reliable metrology, I've given a few examples at the beginning of my talk, is essential in a wide range of healthcare settings. I've then given a case study of how metrology can have a really significant and important impact looking at body temperature measurement. The reliability of body temperature measurement has been eroded since the phasing out of liquid in glass thermometry and a phasing in of a very wide range of different devices and modes. It seems that forehead thermometers are particularly unsuitable for fever screening in public health settings. It seems that thermal imaging could be useful if followed up by a reliable clinical thermometer at the moment, but it does need investigation if it could be used on its own for fever screening through the inner campfire, but that work still needs to be done. Ear thermometers are generally reliable, providing they're used according to instructions and undergo regular traceable performance checks. But improvements are certainly needed to get ready for any future pandemic, and we really need to do that as a matter of urgency. Improvements are needed to really improve the consistency of a patient's journey through healthcare settings because of the wide range of different thermometers that are in use at the moment, so that we can improve diagnostic scores so that people are treated better for things like sepsis and meningitis, to reduce the amount of avoidable deaths in a healthcare setting. That's those people who maybe had meningitis or maybe had sepsis, but who weren't diagnosed early enough. And there's international coordinated action underway at the moment seeking to address this issue, but there certainly needs to be a lot more done on an international and national basis as well. So thank you very much for your attention. If you've got any questions, please do let me have them. And I hope you found the talk interesting. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Graham, for this very enriching and beneficial presentation. Actually, we have many questions, but due to the time limitation, we will just ask one question. Then for the other questions, please keep sending your questions to the emails that had appeared before, and it will appear again on the monitor. Keep sending the questions. Now you can see the emails. Send you all your questions, Dr. Graham. He will be delighted to answer your questions via email. We have only time for one question. The question to Professor Graham: can you tell us about the recent progress in the collaboration procedure of the thermal imaging cameras used in surveillance and the other healthcare related activities?
Yeah, okay, so I think that the question is related to the work that we're doing in the CCT committee, and we've synthesized all of the standards that we could find about fever screening in both health and in a security setting as well. And the standard is currently being reviewed, the guidance is currently being reviewed by the committee before it goes to the CCT in August for release to public people for comment. So that's where we are at the moment.
Okay. We have actually one more question before we conclude. The second question says, can you tell us in brief your participation in the ionizing radiation field in its R&D activities in this meteorological field?
In ionizing radiation, did you say?
I will repeat the question again.
Yes, please. Sorry.
In brief, your participation in ionizing radiation field in its R&D activities in this meteorological field.
So if I understand the question correctly, the question is asking about MPL's activities in ionizing radiation. And we have a very wide range of activities in ionizing radiation through developing phantoms, developing ways of improving targeting of radiotherapies, of setting up of having the standards for making sure that hospitals give the right doses and diagnose in the actual hospitals themselves. And there's a wide network of dissemination of standards throughout the UK to make sure that happens correctly. We also do testing of MRI machines and imaging as well, and other imaging modalities such as non-ionizing radiation ones like acoustics as well. So a very wide range of activities. But if the questioner wants to know more information, then they're very welcome to visit the MPL website where it talks more about it. And if they want to talk to specific colleagues about specific questions, they're welcome to email me and I can put them in touch.
Dr. Graham Machine, thank you very, very much for joining us. Dr. Graham Machine is the head of the National Institution for Metrology in United Kingdom, and he enlightened us on the metrology, the impact of metrology in the health field. Thank you again, Dr. Machine, and hope
My
to
pleasure.
see you in other conferences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
السيدات والسادة، الآن ننتقل إلى ورشة العمل الثانية، والتي يقدمها مدير عام المركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة بالمملكة العربية السعودية الدكتور إسماعيل الفالح، تحت عنوان القياس ممكن للنمو الصناعي. ننتظر قليلا، سنتوقف قليلا وبعد ذلك نبدأ ورشة العمل الثانية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وعليه نتوكل والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سيدات السادة تحية طيبة وبعد إن شاء الله سوف نقدم في هذا ورشة العمل عن علم القياس ممكن وعامل رئيسي للنمو الاقتصادي للنمو الصناعي عفوا. يتكون البرنامج من 4 محاور أساسية. يدور أولها حول المترولوجيا في المملكة، ويتعلق المحور الثاني بنظرة أكثر شمولية على المركز الوطني للقياس والمعايرة، ثم يختص المحور الثالث على أن علم القياس أو ما يطلق عليه باسم المترولوجيا عاملا ممكنا وفاعلا رئيسيا للنمو الصناعي. أما المحور الرابع سوف يكون لدور المترولوجيا في الصناعات الطبية. سوف نقدم نظرة سريعة على تطور المترولوجيا في المملكة العربية السعودية. في البداية سوف يكون شرح مبسط وعرض سريع لبعض التعريفات الأساسية عن ما يقصد في المترولوجيا أو علم القياس. هو عبارة عن علم وممارسة القياس، والهدف الرئيسي من هذا العلم هو توفير إطار للقياسات التي يمكن تتبعها أو يمكن وصلها بسلسلة غير منقطعة. والمترولوجيا عبارة عن قياسات متماسكة بحيث يمكن للجميع الجمع بين نتائج وطرق القياس المختلفة. قياس قابل للمقارنة، يمكن مقارنته بين عدد من المختبرات سواء داخلية أو عالمية. والقياس المستقر والثابت عبارة عن يمكن استخدام قياس طويل المدى في أي مكان. ومن المعلوم أن البنية التحتية للجودة والتي تسعى لها جميع دول العالم والمملكة واحدة منها. علم القياس يكون واحد من الأركان الأساسية أو إحدى الأركان الأساسية في البنية التحتية للجودة، والتي تعتمد على المقاييس، وهي ضرورة للتجارة والاقتصاد العالميين والصحة المجتمعية. ولكي تكون القياسات متماسكة وقابلة للمقارنة زي ما ذكرنا سابقا ومستقرة، هناك سلسلة من الإسناد والتتبع المترولوجي لها في كل دولة، وبناء عليه يتم إنشاء المراكز الوطنية في الدولة اللي يتم ربط تلك الإسنادية في الوحدات الدولية، ثم الموقع على اتفاقية متر. ولذلك فإن الكثير مما نقوم به ونمارسه في حياتنا اليومية يتأثر بالمقاييس ويحتاج لها وينقاد أيضا بها، مثل التجارة والصناعة، الرعاية الصحية، جودة الحياة والبيئة، العلم والابتكار، كلها تعتمد بشكل رئيسي على القياس. قد لا يكون هناك إحساس أو غير ملموس هذا الأثر في علم القياس.
That is also to supply
الكثير من المجالات في حياتنا اليومية وفي حياتنا العملية تستخدم علم القياس زي ما ذكرنا، إما بطريقة مباشرة أو غير مباشرة، وجميعها تكون
connected to discrete and vector metrology. as I have mentioned, metrology is one of the main pillars in the infrastructure of quality, which is being applied and which is an international tool. As shown in the figures on the screen, we can see how the international organizations concerned with quality and measurement collaborate, such as those are processes such as metrology, accreditation, testing, standardization, certification. And the next slide, this slide, we see the quality infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. In the middle, in the center, we see a main element in metrology, a main element in the infrastructure, that is metrology. The national metrology system or national measurement system. National measurement system is an system that is agreed upon internationally and includes main elements that you see on the screen. First, maintaining measurement standards for the units assigned to international bodies. Also, it provides calibration and testing, whether on a national or international level, such as the National Center for Measurement. Those standards supply the current and future needs. Also, it helps in supporting and providing the services of labs, metrology or legal metrology is also assisted by this aspect. It also provides the needed documents in metrology. Legal metrology is the national legal metrology system in the country. The SASO has adopted legal metrology in Saudi Arabia as part of the National Conversion Program 2020. After that, the system was updated and issued in its new version in Saudi Arabia, so that it included the legal metrology within the legal metrology initiative. After that, in 2017, the initiative was implemented by the SASO. Then the program was launched in Saudi Arabia, particularly in Riyadh, under the title of the National Program for Standardization and Calibration. In 2019, there was an expansion in legal metrology services so that it covers all of Saudi Arabia under the supervision of SASO to provide legal metrology services for different bodies and different needs. Now we move to another aspect in our lecture today, the National Metrology and Measurement Center and the role of this center in Saudi Arabia. This is a history overview of events in the NMCC. It was established in 1963 by a royal decree. It included two units, two international units. They are the kilo and the meter and the gram. then there was a government project after the establishment. In 2014, there was a government project to develop the labs of the NMCC and train staff to deal with the newest and most recent technologies and devices in that sense. In 2011, Saudi Arabia signed the Meter Agreement, and also accepted and standardized and became one of the accredited entities in the international measurement accreditation. Now the NMCC has a number of comparisons in the KCDB, the international platform for the ability of measurement, and we are keen that in 2021 we can include all the comparisons made by the center. We can include them on this platform. We can we can show the abilities that we have. The center consists of 32 labs. It provides measurement services in more than 200 services. It has 7 administrations, and it has its main labs and its subsidiary labs. One of the tasks of the NMCC is to maintain the main standards, is to maintain the national measurement standards and develop them in accordance with the national standards, and as well as link them to all the international measurement units. It also provides measurement services and consultations for private and public entities. As well, it provides training in the metrology and measurement fields, and measurement for industrial services of all kinds. It works also in the metrology field. It represents Saudi Arabia in regional gatherings and international committees for metrology and measurements and all specializations. That was in short the most important tasks of the center. Now we move to the third element, which is metrology crucial role in industry. Metrology is involved in all industries: environmental, health, trade, scientific research, and other fields. It is also involved in all the stages of a manufactured product, in the pre-manufacturing process, in the designing and the raw material phase, in the manufacturing itself, in the production stage also. Metrology is involved as well in post-manufacturing phases, whether to control quality or to determine the reference for measurement. Also, when using the tools and devices of measurement, it is used there. Metrology plays a role in our lives, and almost there's no field where metrology is not involved. Despite that, many people may not have heard of metrology. There is increasing demand by different sectors, industrial sectors. There is increasing demand of high quality products, of high quality industrial products, and also consumers demand those high quality products and demand that they do meet the high and good standards. There is selectivity in the manufactured products, and that selectivity has a main role in metrology. As an example, there must be a consistent sequence in metrological traceability. This chain and this connected chain should exist and should be used in factories so that we do reach and we do succeed at the national metrology and testing levels. Those NMI are at the top of the triangle. The units used in the NMCC and in the other measurement centers are connected with the international measurement system so that we have conformity in the tools used in manufacturing. This sheds the light now we want to shed the light on the role of metrology in industry and in our daily lives. There are aspects of metrology that may not be visible to the naked eye in our daily lives, but we know that there are systems working in conformity and in harmony to make that doable and available. Let's have some examples. Metrology has major effects in our lives, such as in the field of power, energy, trade exchange, the demand and supply movement, transportation, fuels, whether we're talking about petrol pumps or the pumps used in energy stations. Also, we have another example, which is natural gas and how it is transported from from the source to the houses of the consumers in the pipes. As well, we can talk about manufacturing channels in which metrology is involved, the networks of connections and telecommunication, international navigation systems, high accuracy clocks, and the alignment of time zones between receptors and transmitters. How these signals are sent between transmitters, and the International Center for Weighing. Each month a report is sent and produced by this center to determine the extent to which the reference hours have changed. As well, one of the manufacturing aspects is general health and diagnosis, and taking the vital indicators at different levels in metrology in medical labs. That is in addition to radiation doses, whether we're talking about X-rays or medical and treatment radiations. There is precise measurement for the amounts and the doses of radiations given to patients. If those measurements did not exist, we would have had complications and issues in radiation treatment with severe results. We will talk in the next slide about the most prominent contributions of metrology in manufacturing and technology and high technology manufacturing industries. As you can see, metrology
for different measurement units in different industries. In addition to ensuring accurate timing as far as the accuracy of manufacturing and performance, we have seen rapid change as time has passed, specifically in the manufacturing phase, and this might lead into a modification and some of the characteristics of the product. So by the usage of accurate measurement tools that is accredited according to the standards, and as it's clear with the advanced technology, this is mainly correlated to the science of metrology. Also, it's evident that during the past 6 years, there were a decline in the variation between the manufacturer, the producers, and this variation was solely referred to the metrology in manufacturing. So the advancement and the development of the metrology science have helped the progress of this process, as we are attaining high levels of accuracy. And it's also evident that there are two main causes that has led to the accuracy in manufacturing. First, that the practical mechanical engineering have been modified, and many industrial measurements that has led to the development in the accuracy of manufacturing. And the second element, that many of the recent developments, specifically in the devices used in the production lines and the manufacturing facilities, did lack the scientific reference in manufacturing, as opposite to what's we see now. Also, the industry that use laser and fiber optics on a wide range. And also the GPS system and the receival of signals through the satellites. There are clear examples of accuracy in metrology, even though the accuracy, as we are trying to save millions of lives. Also, metrology also the base for the development of industries, as it is as many scientific tools such as the three-dimension measurements, by applying the ideal situation, and also the 3D printing or the 3D drawing before before the manufacture takes place. And also laser devices are used to have a direct access for the tools used for measurement, since the meter unit is measured using the light interaction using different laser devices. So it's usage in manufacturing and scanning. It makes it tightly correlated directly to the metrology basic reference tools, and since there are variation in metrology with very minimal percentages, which is allowed for legally in different sectors that engage in manufacturing activities, or the devices that are used by consumers in different fields. Also, the artificial intelligence in the production lines. There is a scanning process and also a termination of the variation percentages in the manufactured product, so that if the manufactured product had any inconsistency in metrology, it will be referred to, and all of that will not be achieved unless the reference of metrology tools and precision in all the processes within those manufacturing facilities and within the laboratories. This also helps to a great extent facilitating different technological aspects in precision in manufacturing. Also the direct access to the metrology units, and we have given the first example of the length units as into the 3 and 2-dimensional CMMs, limiting intrinsic errors to only the refractive index of air in concurrence with the international standards, and also using the advanced devices such as also in electrical metrology is used directly, such as the Josephson array systems of 1 pole to 10 poles to reduce the error in some margin in some of the products. And also time remains a vital element in the manufacturing process, as it is developing in the manufacturing field in general. And if the practical metrology is correlated to the national standards through a chain of unbroken chain of comparisons and calibrations, as we have stated in the beginning of the, and as we have seen the hierarchy, we have on top of that pyramid, we do have those national centers placed at the top of this pyramid. So this we shout out to all the our manufacturers here, and to reach out to the local laboratories and the local metrology centers. And looking at the precision metrology, many industries is developing consistently to achieve such goals. As far as the application, it's well known that the GPS systems, used in cybersecurity, always checking the time accuracy and requires direct correlation to the reference hours in the national centers, and is always leads to a great deal of improvement in metrology and the instruments of metrology that lead to scientific discoveries that are unexpected in fields which lead to the development in such measurements. And in conclusion, we summarize what we had stated briefly. This is the general, this is an overlook for all the manufacturing requirements of the precision manufacturing, and there are two main points. There's a very strong correlation relationship between the capabilities of metrology within the country or within certain facilities, and also the rise of new technologies and industries that require higher percentages of high degrees of precision in manufacturing. So there's a natural growth for certain industries. In addition, in some industries, such as the electrical circuits manufacturing, that are highly dependent on the intertrade between different countries, and as you are well aware, this is a market that's worth billions of dollars, and this is evident in the field, and we always know that the pressure will always remain to reach higher degrees of precision in metrology. And we're able to achieve a higher level of precision that is continuously competing in international markets. Now we move on to the fourth axis, and now is in this International Day of Metrology. We will talk in this axis mainly about the impact of metrology in the medical field, medical industries. The complication of the medical metrology continues with the development of the those medical devices that we had noticed in many medical devices, and the metrology is a very important requirement to better serve the medical field. We'll try to summarize. We will the next slides we're merely speaking about the credibility of metrology, and to reduce the number of rejections at the medical laboratories when the comparison and calibration takes place for medical devices, and also the inclusive protection. Since we have been facing this pandemic, and may Allah help us overcome this pandemic. Was of great importance to reduce the number of rejection of the samples sent to the laboratories, so we're trying to reduce such cases of the rejection to ensure that the value is provided to the consumer. There should be a reduction of the rejections of the samples. As far as the inclusive protection from certain diseases, determine the appropriate dosages that are for vaccination or for chemotherapy dosages. Those it has to be of great precision. And in conclusion, we'll talk about the summary of what has been achieved. If the international quality infrastructure, which is dependent on metrology, is essential for global trade, economy, health, and society. For materials to be coherent, comparable, and stable, chains of traceability based on the work of the National Metrology Institute, NMIS, and also NMCC, Saudi Arabia, should be provided. Much of what we do and practice in our daily lives is influenced, driven, and underpinned by metrology. Trade and industry, healthcare, quality of life, science, and innovation all rely on metrology, directly or indirectly. CIPM MRI is essential tool developed to remove technical barriers to international trade. Metrology influences all healthcare activities and ensures the accuracy and validity of medical test results to acquire perfect data to achieve the most secure diagnosis. Metrology also provides big support to industry and plays an important role in the industry developments and the new industries of innovation through the manufacturing sector, and it's a tool and a main tool in the vision of the Kingdom 2030. In conclusion, I only but thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Doctor, for this presentation. We're almost out of time, so first question to Ismail: what is the role of the NMCC for supporting manufacturers and factories? That's a very good question. Many factories include labs, or they do measure their devices. They do measurements using their own devices. Measurements have to be based on standard values. If they are not based on the national or in the national standards or metrology standards, these measurements cannot be validated and the quality of the product cannot be validated. Another question, the NMCC, is it a supplementary service for quality monitoring factories and labs? The question is clear. Yes, as we have mentioned in our slides, factories of different specialties have to achieve the traceability of metrology by linking the measurement tools to the internal metrology of the labs and of the factory itself. Those have to be linked to the metrology centers. Also, metrology services can be provided within the factories in the national centers so that devices are measured to cover the validity and the credibility of the measurement tool itself in the factory to produce the product in the appropriate way, since metrology is involved in all the stages of manufacturing. First, the measurement units are determined along with the designing phase. Then we move to the manufacturing process, where the traceability is carried out In that level, we take the error percentile or percentage to the minimum in order to achieve the essential requirements of other sectors. Then there is the post-manufacturing stage. We make sure that this product has achieved all the required standards, and we see whether with usage this product is affected. Over time we do meter and we do measure all those aspects. There's a final question for you, Dr. Ismail, and we wish to have a concise answer to it if that's possible. What is the role of the metrology in achieving the Vision 2030 in regards to manufacturing? That's an important question. And thanks Allah, based on the support by the custodian of the two holy mosques, there has been much development and investment in the NMCC. The center started to provide high quality and high accuracy services. Also, along with the Vision 2030, the Saudization of many aspects and manufacturing fields has been done. There have been developments to many fields. When any product is manufactured and when this product is manufactured using a device, there is coordination between this device and between this factory and between the standard or between the standardization entities, unless there is a national and there is a comprehensive referencing process that goes on. There is a unified entity that supervises those measurement and metrology processes, which is the NMCC. The measurement is done on site in the factory or in labs or through other means, but in the end it is supervised by the NMCC. Thank you very much, Dr. Ismail Al-Falih, the General Director of the NMCC. He talked to us about metrology as an enabler for industrial growth. Now we will move to the next session. We will invite Dr. Sultan Al-Hamadi, the Vice President of Standards and Metrology in SASO. He will shed the light on the most prominent points that we've talked about in this forum, and he will specify the recommendations drawn on from this forum. Peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you. In the name of Allah, peace, mercy, and blessings be upon our Prophet. In conclusion of the International Metrology Forum, Saudi Arabia, represented by SASO and with support and with sponsorship of the Minister of Industry and Investment, in the end of this forum in the year 2021, I am glad and I am honored to offer my gratitude and appreciation for Dr. Majid bin Abdullah Ghazavi, the Minister of Industry and Investment. As well, I thank the Governor of SASO, Dr. Saad Ghazavi, for his support and his continuous following up with our procedures and processes. Thanks to Allah, we have been able in this forum to achieve some of our goals and to keep up with the international developments. I believe everyone has witnessed the carried out activities in this forum, and special thanks go to the opening and the panel sessions, as well as the workshop that accompanied this forum. All those are unified efforts in order to achieve our joint efforts, our joint goals. Additionally, I would like to thank all our participants and our speakers, nationally and internationally, virtual and physical guests, those who belong to the different entities. All thanks and gratitude be to you. We appreciate your effective and efficient presence today. Thanks to all the participants who have had a major role in making this forum able. Before concluding, I would like to thank all the media for their great coverage and participating in all national events to shed a light on such roles. Now we thank Allah that this forum has achieved its goals and has been of the quality that we wished for. If you allow me now, I will state some of the recommendations that we have today. They are as follows. First, the importance of developing a database that includes metrological capabilities in the public and the private sectors, with the aim of utilizing them efficiently, supporting the kingdom's service and other sectors. Two, the importance of inviting research and development centers, universities, and government agencies to support research projects in the system of measurement and metrology in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, using modern technologies and modern means. The third recommendation is supporting and developing the programs of capacity and technical capability. Four, emphasizing the importance of calibrating medical devices used for diagnosis and treatment to raise the quality of health services. Five, the necessity of comprehension and integration between the regional gatherings for metrology to activate recommendations and regulations and legislations made by the member states. Number six, combating international pandemics via unifying efforts and unifying as well precautionary plans and measurement means. Number seven, the necessity to unify the international requirements for all medical devices according to the international system, SI unit system, to be able to face this pandemic and the following ones. Thank you for your presence, thank you for your participations, and we are looking forward to future events. We wish to see you in good health and well-being. Thank you, Mr. Thomas Al-Hamadi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this forum. The forum for international metrology organized by Saudi Arabia, represented by SASO and the NMCC, in coordination with the International Metrology Day 2021 under the title Measurement for Health. Thank you for your participation and presence. We must draw attention that if you wish to receive the presentations used in this forum, you can contact the emails provided on the screen, and all the presentations will be sent to you, inshallah. نود أن نعلن في نهاية هذا المؤتمر دولي